of famous economist and author Stephen Levitt, the key to learning is feedback. It is nearly impossible to learn anything without it. So today in our Top Talk session, we have with us Shivani Malhotra, co-founder and CEO of Positive Vibes Consulting, which she founded in 2016. Positive Vibe Consulting is fast-growing human resource and training consulting firm based out of Gurugram. It was awarded the Startup Excellence Award 2020 and is recognized as one of the most promising startups doing path-breaking work by HR Success Talks in 2020. Shivani is an award-winning seasoned HR and learning specialist with over 17 years of experience in various HR and leadership positions in Indian and multinational companies in India and abroad. Before starting her own venture, Shivani has worked in many prestigious organizations like DCM Shriram Limited, Yum Brands, and KPMG. In her professional journey, she has been awarded many awards, some of them including Business World Education 40 Under 40 Award, HR Excellence Award 2020 by Human Resource Success Talks, and many others. She is also the state president of Women's Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry Haryana, Human Resource. And the list of her achievement goes on and on. So very warm welcome to you, Shivani. Thank you for taking out time and having this discussion with us.
Thank you, Dipanita. It's an absolute pleasure to be on this forum, and I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
So, Shivani, like during this pandemic scenario, right, where everything is so uncertain and even the managers and employees are away from each other. So all the, informal and unstructured conversations that used to take place in a work environment has completely stopped, right? So during this period, how important do you think it is to make feedback formalized in an organization?
I think that's a very relevant question, and I'm sure that's a question which is in the mind of a lot of people, especially in HR, who are trying to keep the situation as normal as possible. So definitely there is a need to have a formal feedback process in place, because feedback, if used in the right way, it can work wonders for an organization. It's very interesting. They say that feedback should be used like rain. It should be gentle enough to nourish a person's growth without destroying his roots. That's exactly what feedback is meant to do. It's supposed to nourish the organization and not, suck out its positivity or motivation. And especially in these times when it is so tough to maintain your, positivity, there is, very, very difficult situation all around. It's all the more important that this tool be used very, very carefully, and it should, encourage people to bring out the best in them and not sort of, suck the steam out of them. And feedback, if given even in today's time, of course, it has to be virtual. It has to be, like the way you and I are talking, it's like a conversation, right? So exactly in the same way, it has to be formalized, it has to be scheduled, because if it is, given in the right way, it helps to definitely improve communication between the leaders and employees, something that is now, really, really challenged in these times. Increase the openness, and it leads to phenomenal improvement and better business results.
So feedback in the right manner, helps to improve communication between leaders and employees, especially in times like today when communication has become a challenge because we're not physically meeting each other. It increases openness and leads to phenomenal improvement and better business results. So yes, definitely feedback needs to be a formal process in the organization. Now, when we talk about the word process, one word that comes to my mind is regularity. So unless you make feedback a regular and continuous exercise, then no matter how many formal processes you make, it will be futile. So in other words, feedback has to be a part of the DNA of your organization. It has to be a part of the culture of the organization. So it's not something that should be done as a process only when it's appraisal time. In fact, appraisal time should be a consolidated discussion of the feedback that you have shared throughout the year, so that there are no surprises for employees at the end of the year. So yes, definitely we must have a formal process, and all the more important in these times, because as it is, like I said, the communication channels have been, compromised. It's there's hardly any, and actually no physical, meeting that we are having with each other. The catch-up meetings that we used to have. So I think in such times, it's all the more important that feedback sessions are regularly scheduled over a virtual platform, and wherein employees can get very regular feedback on how they're doing, as well as the organization should also get feedback in terms of how the employees are feeling, especially in the current times. How well are they feeling? How cared are they feeling for by the organization? So I think it's a two-way process, and it needs to be definitely made into a formal process.
Right. Absolutely agree with you, because, I have seen many organizations who are still very new to the concept of incorporating continuous feedback in their process. Because
Right.
most of the traditional organization, they have a mindset where the feedback will only happen at the end of the year when we do the appraisal. But
Yes.
especially during this time when the entire dynamic of the organizations are changing because of the changing scenario,
Right.
making the feedback process continuous is one of the most important tasks for any organization. Even if they are a traditional organization, very important to incorporate the continuous aspect to it. So, as you mentioned, regular feedback or regular check-ins, with the employees are very important. But what I feel is there must be a balance, right, between overdoing it and not doing anything at all.
Absolutely.
So I would like to know from you, like, what according to you is the perfect frequency for a check-in to happen, so that it doesn't become too laborious for the employees to even join, and they don't feel like frustrated thinking that no, my organization is probing me to take information out of me. Also, it becomes effective in taking out the key insights of how the employees are actually doing.
Yeah. See, that's a very valid point, that there has to be a balance. You should not be on employees' case as far as feedback is concerned, and you should not also sort of ignore it and leave it or procrastinate it too much. So it depends on how ready your organization is. For example, when I was working in one of the organizations, there was a very beautiful practice of monthly one-on-ones. So the leadership team used to once in a month meet all their reportees individually for 2 hours and just take a stock of what's happening, how much we've done, where is it that we are struggling, and how we can together overcome the struggles that we are facing. I think that worked very beautifully, because there was continuous feedback, there was continuous improvement, and that year, in fact, the sales went up the sky, because there was so much of innovation happening and so much of continuous improvements happening, because people are talking to each other. So I feel, what worked well for that organization was monthly one-on-ones, but it may be different for different organizations. It could be, but I would not, recommend anything more than, 3 months, a quarter. At least once in a quarter, you must have a meeting with your people, and just take a stock of it. Just make it into a simple conversation. Don't, make it like, okay, now we are having a feedback session, because the moment you say feedback, people become wary. Okay, what feedback is he going to share? So
Right.
just say it's our quarterly conversation that we are going to have, or a quarterly one-on-one that we are going to have, where we're going to discuss, amongst other things, we're going to discuss performance, and we're going to discuss, giving each other feedback. That's another thing that I feel is lacking in a lot of places, and we call it we call it feed forward. So feedback should not just be feedback, but it should also be feed forward, which means that it has to be a two-way road. It can't be that there's only the people manager who is giving feedback to the employee. The employee must also be encouraged to give feedback to the people manager. that's when this whole process is really effective and very, very healthy. And then all the, the fears related to feedback are just gone in employees.
Absolutely. It should be a two-way process and the employee should be encouraged. So, Shivani, when, as you rightly said before, that when people hear the term feedback, they like become very aware of like what is going to happen, right?
Yes.
So in case of, when the feedback is not positive, say it is a negative feedback or a critical feedback. So in that case, like many leaders as well, I have seen who, are not very comfortable in delivering the negative feedback, right?
Yes.
And reception is also a very like talked about matter in that case. So I would like to get your opinion or some tips from you how, the negative feedback can be delivered both from the people's leader to the employees as well as from the employees to the people's leader, so that it gets, approachable or acceptable to both the participants.
Sure. I think, again, a very pertinent question, because that's something that I have, in my experience, seen a lot of people struggling with. While the feedback can be negative, but the impact of that feedback should not be negative. So let's remove the word negative from here, because the word negative has a connotation of being unproductive, unfruitful, and unwelcome. Instead, let's call it developmental feedback, which is probably far more positive, acceptable, and non-threatening term to use. Now, coming to developmental feedback, or what we say, having a difficult conversation. Well, if you approach feedback with the objective of genuinely helping the person to improve, then you will see that the overall output of such a discussion is hugely positive and motivating. The intention of feedback should not be to, pull the steam out of the person, where he walks out of the door completely down and out. But instead, he walks out of that door motivated, charged, and ready to do what it takes to improve himself. Now, the question is, how do we do that? So when you have to have a difficult conversation with someone, in my experience, there are a few things that you need to do. Number one, your people should definitely be trained on how to give feedback. That's a classic problem that organizations face, and they fail when there are difficult conversations. People are not trained, on giving feedback. Because if feedback is given in the wrong way, it can be hugely detrimental to the organization, right? So I would strongly recommend that all people managers should definitely be trained on the art of giving constructive feedback, which motivates employees to do better, right? So definitely training is number one. Before you even think of formalizing a process of feedback, please make sure that your people managers are trained on how to have a feedback conversation, especially if it is a difficult conversation. Secondly, when you're having a difficult conversation, it's very important to have, ample and very specific data, especially when you're giving feedback on performance, which is not at par with your expectations. Cite specific instances, situations, and areas where the employee has struggled to perform. And feedback discussions, especially the ones that are around improvement, should always be supported by data, evidence, specific instances, and examples. You can't say, things like I think or I feel. Well, have a conversation around what has actually happened. So number one, do your research, have a lot of data to back up what you are saying. Now, there is a prerequisite to this. Before you judge an employee's underperformance, just sit back and reflect that, did you make the expectations clear? Did you go about doing goal setting with them right at the beginning of the year? Did you tell them, what is your expectation as an organization? A lot of organizations, follow goal setting in the way of SMART goals. So did you follow that? Were you specific? Were your goals measurable? Were they, attainable? Were they relevant? Were they time bound? If not, well, then it's not right to blame the employee for non-performance.
Right.
So think whether you want to have a difficult conversation in such a scenario or not, because more than the employee, it is the fault of somewhere the process has not been followed. Unless people don't know what they're supposed to do,
Right.
How are you going to measure their performance and say, no, I think that you've not done well? Well, There's no metric proving that.
Right.
Right. And, in a difficult feedback conversation, in my experience, the traditional sandwich approach works best. So you start with the good things, bring out what the person has done well, appreciate the person for the things that he has done well, bring in the not so good ones, again in a constructive way. Now here it's very important to use the right language, which is why I said people need to be trained on these kind of conversations. So you avoid using strong words like you've not been able to perform or you've let us down or anything like that. Rather say that you have the potential to do much more, just that you need to work concertedly towards it. Imagine the impact of such a statement. And I'm talking this from experience because one of my previous bosses used to give feedback like this. And, he never used to say that, tumne ye nahi kiya. He used to say that you have the potential to do it, but you're not utilizing your potential. So that used to leave me, very motivated to actually work even harder because I was not criticized for what I have not done. I was encouraged to do more. Exactly. So that approach definitely works. And overall, end it with a positive statement. Like I said, and people should walk out of the door feeling encouraged and motivated to do more. Also do it privately. As they say, recognition should be public, but feedback, especially improvement related feedback, should always be private. So if the impact of your feedback has further pulled the morale of the employee down, then somewhere you failed in this exercise. And if you've done it in the right way, it can work wonders, in motivating and helping even the below average employees to come up and work better. So those are some of the things that, you can do for difficult conversations.
So the 2 points among all the points that you shared that, I think most organizations should follow, blindly is to train their employees, because most of the organizations do not encourage the training process, right? And that leads to the failure of the entire feedback process.
Absolutely. It's an expectation that because you've become a people manager, so you would know how to give feedback. That's not right.
Exactly.
They are not HR people. They've never been trained on, the human element. So that is why I recommend organizations to have an HR for non-HR workshop in their organizations, especially for people managers to, acclimatize them with these softer skills.
Right.
On how to approach an employee, how to have a conversation, a difficult conversation, how to even do their appraisal. Half of them don't even know that, the process of doing appraisal, and it's not their fault. Yeah. They were never trained, a chartered accountant never learned how to give feedback or how to, do appraisal. You have to, as HR, train your people for every HR process, for every people related process.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And another thing is, that you said that clarifying the expectation. Until and unless the employees know what is expected of them, and if it is not clearly set in front of them, then like at the end of the year, if you are bombarding them with the assumptions like you have not done well and you didn't accomplish the things that you were meant to, then they will say what was expected from me, right? It was not cleared in the first place. So that is the things that you mentioned very correctly. So, on this context, as you mentioned, like how feedback, making it continuous, as you mentioned before, like it is important. And bombarding them with the feedback at the end of the year or during the appraisal is not something which should be done. So in that context, I need, I would like to understand your view on how you think feedback should be linked to the performance evaluation. By linking, what I mean is, for example, in case we are rating the employees, right, on their goals that are measurable. So there must be what I'm actually trying to say is, should there be a matrix for feedback as a parameter as well, where the feedback that is given throughout the process or throughout the stage is actually contributing to the evaluation process?
Absolutely. I think that is what should ideally happen, and most of the good organizations, have it in place. See, it's important to understand that feedback has to be woven at every stage of the performance management cycle and not just at the time of evaluation. So it has to start, at the beginning of the year when you do goal setting and expectation setting with employees. Seek their feedback into the process and set mutually agreeable goals, right? It then has to be a part of the monthly or quarterly one-on-one discussions, whatever you decide to go ahead with, depending on your organization's need. Right. And it should be very structured, focused, and documented. Most importantly, documented to discuss the goals and give feedback as we, as well as ask for feedback, right? So it then also has to be an integral part of the mid-year review. And finally, you will see that at the end of the year, when you're actually doing performance evaluations, it becomes a much lighter discussion because you have given regular feedback, you have documented feedback throughout the year, which is just, very smoothly flowing into the year-end performance appraisal. And in fact, the employee exactly knows the areas that he needs to work on because he's been given regular feedback. So nothing comes as a surprise to them. And, also in my process, unless the feedback process is not linked to the formal evaluation process, it is not done with the intensity and seriousness that it deserves. So, which is why, like in the same organization I was talking to you about, which had monthly one-on-ones, right. Having those monthly one-on-ones in a structured, focused way, documented feedback was a part of the KRAs of the leadership team. So it was put in their KRAs, in the people, they used to follow a balanced scorecard approach. So in the people section, it was, mentioned that every month you have to do it. And that is when it was seriously done. So because it's going to impact my performance in the end, right? So I think definitely makes sense to incorporate it, as a part of performance, not just evaluation, but round the year performance management process.
Right. Very well said, Shivani. So, the next thing that I would like to ask you, you have mentioned it before, but I would like an elaborate answer on it to understand, its position. What are the key questions that an organization must ask its employees, to get a better idea about its own standing among the employees?
Yeah. I think now we are shifting gears from employee feedback to the organization asking for feedback. Am I right?
Yes.
See, which is something typically known as employee engagement survey in most of the organizations. Now, again, very, very important to have a feed forward system wherein employees are also coming and giving you feedback. So a few things that you should definitely ask people about. Number one is leadership. So you may have a vision for your leadership, but it's important to know how people are perceiving the organization's leadership. Is the leadership empowering enough? How open are they to be challenged? How fair are they in their assessment of talent, mentoring their teams, and creating a culture of empowerment and constant improvement? So definitely feedback on leadership. Number two, feedback on the culture. Is the culture an open, transparent, and fearless one where employees are encouraged or rather welcome, to challenge the set norms? Are they being heard? Is there any favoritism? Do they feel cared for? And especially important in these times when there is no physical access to each other. Right. In other words, do they like coming to work or do they enjoy doing their job? So basically all questions around the organization's DNA, right? Number three, you should ask them definitely about career development and growth. Is the organization providing ample opportunities to people to grow, develop, and progress in their careers? Are people clear about their roles and expectations in the form of goals? Do they have a clarity on the career path and growth? What's in plan for me? Is there enough reward and recognition happening in the organization to encourage and motivate good performers? Do they have enough learning opportunities to help them succeed in their roles? So all these questions become very, very important from an employee point of view, and definitely something that the organization must know about their people. So these are some of the things, and definitely, you should ask about any processes that need to undergo change, because a lot of times I have seen that because there is something in place, so organization feels that theek chal raha hai, but actually, if you ask employees, you may get much better, ideas on how to run the same process in a more effective way. So definitely ask for improvement suggestions, and I've seen that a lot of suggestions come from the shop floor, the people who are actually on the ground doing the actual work. And some of the suggestions, in one of the manufacturing companies that I was working with, it led to a lot of improvement in productivity and increase in the production on the shop floor. So definitely, seek for that kind of feedback. But more than the questions that you ask, I just want to say one thing here, that make sure that when you get the feedback from your people, do something about it. Because problem in organizations is that people give feedback, but no action is taken on it. It just becomes a document then. So people then start taking this entire process as a formality, or a tick in the box by HR. And I'm being very honest, because I've been a part of HR. And that's when this entire process loses its credibility. And that is something which is very harmful for the organization, because you're not listening to what your people are telling you. You choose to sort of live in a bubble which someday will burst and will have very adverse consequences for an organization in the form of attrition or loss in revenue or sales, and sometimes even closure of business. It can be that fatal. So it's important to not only ask the right questions to solicit feedback, but also make an action plan on how you're going to act upon it. And more importantly, tell that to people. Tell them what are you going to do about this feedback. And this is something, again, we used to do. Once we got all the responses on the employee engagement survey, within a month, we were supposed to, analyze, take out the key, feedback areas that, majority of the people have given us, the areas of concerns, and create an action plan, for the year. And then we used to have a meeting with the office, entire staff, and communicate to them that this is what you've told us and this is what we're going to do about it. And then every quarter, we used to give them an update that, okay, we are here. This is what we have done. This is what is pending, and we'll do it at the end of the year. And all this was, woven into the KRAs and the performance evaluation of the HRD. So it became a part of their performance, to execute the action plan that came out, because that's how it gets serious.
Yes.
It gets formalized. And we did everything that we could. And the next year, there was a significant improvement in attrition. There was a significant improvement in the overall happiness quotient in the organization. And of course, it had a great impact on the business as well. So the sales were good, our profits were up. So it's all linked. It's all a value chain that is linked. So very important, you may ask the right questions, but most importantly, actionate, the feedback, whatever you want to do in terms of, addressing the concerns of employees. Otherwise, they lose trust, and then it just becomes a document jo HR har saal bhejta hai. So, yeah.
And, you talked about the greater impact in terms of organization, but this not acting upon the feedback, I have seen during my time of internship when I was working as an HR intern in a big company. So they used to take, feedback after the training. Like they used to have a lot of training session, and I was the one who was responsible for, collecting all the feedback and everything. And I collected it. I used to take it to my mentor and see that I used to tell him that, see, these are the feedback that you have got. Then what is the next step for you to do? He was like, "Rakh do drawer mein."
Exactly. You're very right. I've seen this happening in a lot of places, and that is why then employees also just do. If you see in such organizations, even though they have employee engagement survey, people will never write anything controversial or anything genuine. They'll just say it's a formality, kuch hona to hai nahi. So let's just,
And even people were not very ready to take part in the employee engagement events, and the attrition rate was so high. So when you talked about attrition, I can now link, between the not taking action on the feedback that were given to them and the attrition rate.
Absolutely. The both the items are linked actually. Because in an employee engagement survey, employees, if they are giving you genuine feedback, it would be around their either the culture of the organization or things that they want you to make better for them, or any career opportunities, growth opportunities. But if you choose just not to जिसको बोलते हैं हिंदी में सुना अनसुना कर देना, तो फिर तो you should be ready for attrition
Right.
in your organization.
Right. And Shivani, before we end the conversation, the last thing that I would like to ask you is something different from feedback, formal feedback. In this scenario, when every employee and their managers are away from each other, a lot of, as I mentioned before, that unstructured and the informal one-on-ones doesn't happen, right? That used to happen between colleagues as well as between managers and employees.
Right.
And many people, during this time have a fear in them of approaching for a one-on-one conversation, informal one-on-one conversation, thinking that they might disturb the other person who is not in front of them. So any tips you can share for having an effective informal one-on-one conversation?
Sure. See, a lot of it depends on the HR people in today's time, and I'm sure they are doing enough, all that they can in these tough times. And also on leaders, I would say. So I, for example, have a client, and they asked me the same question, that how do we build that sort of connect? So I told them that, you have a meeting every day, which they have, the morning huddle team meeting they have. I said, first 15 minutes, just don't talk business. Don't talk business. Give 15 minutes to each other. Just say what you did yesterday, what's happening at home. You watched which latest series you watched on Netflix. Right. Get into a discussion which is off work. And invariably, if there is someone who wants to share something, will share something with you, or maybe at a later date, because you're giving them the comfort that you are available to them even for non-work related matters. Mm-hmm. And at a later date, if they want to reach out to you over a phone call, they'll be far more comfortable, because every day you are asking them of their well-being. So that definitely is something that leaders can do in these times. And secondly, there has to be constant connect. Thank God for technology that at least we can see each other. So while we can't meet, but there should be complete connect, I would say, as far as possible. At least once in a month, have an informal meeting with people, wherein it's just fun. It's just talking about all things under the sun, where you're giving them an opportunity to just be themselves, okay? And minus the leaders. We don't need the leaders, just leave them be, with themselves. So facilitate these sort of short interactions between employees. And like in one of my, companies that I'd worked with, in fact, till last year, I was helping them with their HR function. So I had given a slot of 5 to 6 every day in the evening, where I would be available to take any personal calls, any counseling people need, any kind of help that they require. I offered that, and I think that's something that organizations should do, because this is a time when there is a lot of suffering around, and there's a lot of pressure, mental pressure on people. So there are people who are reaching out to counselors. So why not have a counselor, a tie-up with a counselor, and have dedicated sessions, slots every day, where people can reach out to that counselor and get professional help to cope up with these times. So these are some of the ways where you can actually keep people connected. The more connect points you have, the more connection points you have, the more easier it will be to wade through these times. And if you just think कि सब काम कर रहे हैं अपना laptop पे, सब सुबह शाम update दे देते हैं, it's not going to work. It's not going to help. People are doing their work. They will continue to do their work, but what they need right now is a little bit of support from the organization as well, in terms of creating those touch points where they can regularly even vent out if they want to. So create more of those platforms is my advice.
Right, very rightly said, Shivani. Like, the efforts from the organization side in this scenario is very important, because most of the employees on their own won't reach out to the organization. So creating a safe space, engaging them, in making them feel comfortable enough to share their thoughts and whatever they are feeling. And also one thing that you mentioned is very important for the organization is to have a in-house professional help available to the people, so that they can actually contact and have the interaction that they could not have right now because of the scenario.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the conversation between us can go on for so long. It was such a nice interaction with you, but unfortunately the time is a constraint. So yeah, so thank you so much, Shivani. It was really great interacting with you. The insights which you shared on each and every point is so relevant right now, so important for the organizations to follow. And I hope as much as I learned, all the viewers who will be seeing this will learn as much as I did. Thank you for taking out time.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have this conversation with you. I enjoyed it thoroughly myself. And I think you complemented it very well. So thanks for having me on this platform, and all the best, and stay safe. Take care of yourselves, everyone.
You too, Shivani. Thank you.